I still don't know where it came from. When my son was born, my mother-in-law gifted him a plush brown teddy bear, one of those big, old-fashioned ones with stitched paws and glassy button eyes. The kind you'd expect to find sitting in a dusty attic, rather than wrapped in crisp tissue paper inside a fancy gift bag. My wife adored it. She said it reminded her of the bear she had as a kid. She placed it in the crib right away, tucking it neatly next to our son's blankets. I didn't say anything, but I hated the thing. Something about it unsettled me from the start. Maybe it was the way its button eyes always seemed a little too reflective, almost wet. Or the fact that it smelled faintly of something old, even though it was supposed to be brand new. But I let it go. It was just a stuffed animal. At least, that's what I told myself. The first time I noticed something off, it was subtle. The bear was always in a slightly different position whenever I checked the crib. At first, I assumed it was my wife moving it while adjusting the blankets, but then I started paying attention. One night, I tucked our son in, setting the bear neatly against the crib's side. When I checked an hour later, it had shifted just a little, closer to him. The next night, it was resting against the opposite railing. By the third night, I was starting to get that uneasy feeling in my stomach. The one that tells you something isn't right, but your brain desperately tries to explain it away. Then, one night, I woke up to a noise. Soft thuds, not crying, not the usual creaks of the house settling, but something heavier. I got up, rubbing sleep from my eyes, and walked to the nursery. I didn't even turn the light on at first. I just cracked the door open, expecting to see my son shifting in his crib. But the moment my eyes adjusted, I froze. The teddy bear was in the middle of the room, standing upright. It was perfectly balanced on its stubby legs, as if someone had carefully placed it there. But I knew that wasn't possible. I stepped forward, pulse hammering. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe that I'd find my wife awake, playing some kind of joke. But the hallway was silent. The whole house was silent. I hesitated before reaching for the bear. My fingers barely brushed against its fur when my son started screaming, a sharp, shrill wail that sent ice through my veins. I spun toward the crib, heart pounding, and saw him staring at the bear. His tiny face was twisted in fear, his little hands clenched into fists. He wasn't looking at me, he was looking past me, like something was still there. I didn't think, I just acted. I grabbed the bear and threw it into the crib, then scooped my son up, holding him against my chest. The second he was in my arms, his cries softened, but his little body was still rigid, his gaze still locked on the bear. That night, after he finally fell asleep, I shoved the teddy bear into the back of the closet. I shut the door, stuffed a chair in front of it, and crawled into bed without telling my wife. I didn't want to sound ridiculous. The next morning, the bear was back in the crib. I nearly dropped my coffee when I saw it. I stood in the doorway for a full minute, just staring at it, my mind racing through explanations. Maybe my wife had found it and thought I had just misplaced it. Maybe I had been so tired the night before that I thought I had put it away. I didn't say anything, but that night, after everyone was asleep, I did it again. I took the bear, stuffed it deep in the closet, and this time, I locked the door. I even tested the handle before I went to bed. In the next morning, it was sitting in the middle of the room. That was the moment I knew. I didn't care if I sounded insane. I needed to talk to my wife. "Did you put this here?" I asked as casually as I could, gesturing to the bear. She frowned. "Number Y. Are you sure?" Her frown deepened. She picked up the bear, examining it. "What's going on?" I opened my mouth, hesitated. I didn't want to say it out loud. Didn't want to sound like some paranoid lunatic telling ghost stories. So I lied. "Nothing. I just thought I put it away last night." She gave me a weird look but didn't push it. I should have told her. I should have told her. Because that night, when I heard the soft thud, thud, thud of something moving across the floor, I knew it wasn't her. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the teddy bear, stuffed it in a garbage bag, and drove straight to the dump. I watched as the bulldozer crushed it beneath a pile of debris, felt the tension leave my body as the machine rolled over it, burying it under a mountain of trash. I exhaled, relief washing over me. It was gone. 2 nights later, my son woke up crying again. I went to check on him, rubbing my tired eyes as I shuffled into the room. And then I stopped. Standing next to his crib, propped up against the railing, was the teddy bear. The same teddy bear, same size, same color, same button eyes gleaming in the dim light. I could barely breathe. I took slow, careful steps toward it, every nerve in my body screaming at me to run. I picked it up, my hands shaking. It felt damp, cold, like it had been sitting outside in the rain, but it hadn't rained, and as I turned it over, my stomach dropped. The stuffing had been torn near its leg. I remembered that tear, because I was the one who had ripped it. I burned it the next morning, took it outside, doused it in lighter fluid, and watched as the flames devoured it. My wife thought I had lost my mind. I didn't care. All I know is that I never saw that bear again. But sometimes, when I'm alone at night, when the house is silent and my son is fast asleep, I still hear those soft thuds in the hallway, and I wonder, did I really get rid of it? People always say that babies have a sense for things that we don't. They laugh at nothing, cry at nothing, stare at the empty corners of a room like they're seeing something we can't. I never really believed in that, until I had my daughter. She was only about 9 months old when the laughing started. At first it was cute. She had this tiny, joyful giggle that could make anyone smile. Sometimes she'd burst out laughing in the middle of the day, her chubby little hands clapping together, eyes twinkling like she had just heard the funniest joke in the world. But then it started happening at night. It would always be around 2 or 3 a.m., and I'd wake up to the sound of her giggling over the baby monitor, not fussing, not crying, laughing. I'd check the screen, expecting to see her sitting up in her crib, playing with her blankets or reaching for her mobile. But more often than not, she'd be lying on her back, completely still, staring at the ceiling. It was unsettling, but I tried to ignore it. Maybe she was dreaming. Maybe she was just entertaining herself. Babies do weird things, right? But then, one night, it got worse. It was late, 2:42 a.m. to be exact. I remember because I had just glanced at my phone after waking up to the sound of her soft giggles. This time, Something about it felt off. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the baby monitor app. The grainy night vision feed flickered for a second before stabilizing, and what I saw sent ice down my spine. She wasn't just laughing. She was looking at something. Her head was turned toward the corner of the room, her little body still as a statue, her wide eyes locked on empty space. And then, as I watched, she reached up, like she was trying to grab something. My breath caught in my throat. My mind raced through logical explanations. Maybe she was just stretching. Maybe she was reaching for her mobile, even though it was on the other side of the crib. But the way her tiny fingers curled, the way she was giggling at nothing, made my stomach twist. Then on the monitor, something moved. Not her, not in the crib, in the rocking chair. The old wooden chair that sat in the corner of her room, the one we never used, the one that had been perfectly still all night. It creaked, just slightly, just enough that I saw the faintest shift in its position. I shot out of bed, heart pounding, and rushed to her room. I flipped on the light, my pulse hammering in my ears. She turned to look at me, blinking sleepily. Her giggling had stopped. The rocking chair was still, but something felt different. The air was heavier. The silence stretched on too long. And then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The baby monitor screen was still on in my hand. And in the small, grainy display, I could see myself standing in the doorway. I could see my daughter in her crib, and I could see the rocking chair, and in the screen, it was still moving. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I tried to laugh it off. Maybe I had been so groggy that I imagined the chair shifting. Maybe I just needed to stop watching so many horror movies. But the next few nights, it kept happening. Always around 2:40 to 3 a.m., she would start laughing, always looking at the same corner of the room. And every time, I swore I could hear the faintest creak of the rocking chair. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my phone, opened the baby monitor app, and started recording. I told myself I'd just watch it in the morning, when I wasn't half asleep, when my mind was clearer. But when I played the footage back the next day, I heard something. Not just her laughter, not just the creaking of the chair. Something else. Something that whispered, "She's so happy to see me." That chair, I dragged it out to the garage that morning. We never put anything in that corner again. But sometimes, even without it there, my daughter still laughs at something in the empty space, and I don't know what she's seeing. I don't want to know. But at night I still check the monitor, and I still hear the faint sound of something moving. And sometimes I hear a whisper that isn't hers. My wife and I had been trying for a baby for years, and when our son was finally born, we were over the moon. We spent months perfecting his nursery, a soft blue room with white furniture, a mobile above the crib, shelves lined with plush animals. It was perfect, peaceful, at least it was at first. From the moment we brought our son home, things started moving. At first, it was small things. The baby wipes wouldn't be where I left them. His blankets would be folded differently when I came back into the room. The stuffed animals on the shelf seemed rearranged. I figured it was just exhaustion messing with me. Sleepless nights make you forgetful, right? But then, it got stranger. One night, as I was putting my son to bed, I set his pacifier down on the dresser while I changed his diaper. I turned for 2 seconds. When I reached for the pacifier again, it was gone. I searched everywhere, under the crib, behind the dresser, in his blankets. I even checked my pockets, thinking I had absent-mindedly picked it up. Nothing. Frustrated, I grabbed a spare pacifier from the drawer, put him to bed, and turned off the light. As I stepped into the hallway, something made me glance back. My heart nearly stopped. The pacifier was back on the dresser, sitting exactly where I had left it. I stood frozen in the doorway, a deep chill creeping up my spine. My son was sound asleep, the room silent except for the faint whir of the baby monitor. I knew what I'd just experienced wasn't normal, but I told myself it was exhaustion, that I had somehow overlooked it. That was the last time I tried to explain things away. Things escalated quickly after that. The closet door would be open in the morning, even though I knew I had shut it the night before. The mobile above his crib would be spinning when I walked in, even though it wasn't battery operated. Toys on the shelf would be facing different directions. At night, the baby monitor would crackle with static at random times. Sometimes, I swore I heard soft shuffling sounds over the monitor, as if something was moving inside the room. One night, my wife woke me up around 3 a.m., her voice shaking. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I blinked, trying to shake the sleep from my mind. "Hear what?" She didn't answer. Instead, she just pointed to the baby monitor screen. I turned to look, and my blood ran cold. The camera feed showed the nursery, dimly lit by the nightlight. My son was in his crib, sleeping peacefully, but the rocking chair by the window, it was facing the crib. I could have sworn I had turned it toward the wall the night before. As we watched, the chair gave a tiny creak, then another, like someone had just stood up. The next morning, I moved the rocking chair to the basement. I didn't care if I was overreacting. I wanted it out of that room. For the next few days, things were quiet. No weird noises, no strange movement. I finally started to believe that maybe, just maybe, it had all been in my head. Until the final night. It was just after midnight when I woke up to the sound of my son crying. I groggily checked the monitor. He was tossing and turning, whimpering in his sleep. And then I saw it. The closet door was open. Not just a little bit, wide open. A heavy, suffocating feeling crept over me. The room was completely still, but something felt wrong. I threw off the blankets and rushed into the nursery, flicking on the light. Nothing. The closet was open, just as I had seen on the monitor, but it was empty. Nothing inside except neatly hung baby clothes and a few storage bins. I sighed, rubbing my face, trying to slow my racing heart. I turned to check on my son, and that's when I saw the shelf. Every single stuffed animal was facing the crib, neatly arranged, perfectly lined up, all of them staring at my son. I felt my breath catch in my throat. I stepped closer, skin prickling with cold. I knew for a fact that they hadn't been like that earlier. I knew no one had been in the room. So how had they moved? I didn't wait to find out. I scooped up my son, grabbed the baby monitor, and left the nursery, shutting the door behind me. We moved out 2 weeks later. We never told the landlord why. We barely spoke about it at all. But here's the thing. That was 3 years ago. And last week, when I was cleaning out some old boxes in the garage, I found something tucked away in one of the bins. A pacifier. The same kind my son used as a baby. I picked it up, turned it over in my hand, my stomach twisting. Because written on the back, scrawled in faint faded ink, was a date. The exact night we moved out. And underneath, one word. Mine.